afternoon. Here we are once again. What episode we are on?
7.
7. Good. Someone's counting. So here we are, Eduardo and Andy Lipson, having this political discussion challenging the mainstream left. We're having dialogues that are not being had, and we're making sure that we tackle and even disagree. And today will be one of those disagreements, I think. If you all remember, last video, we had a conversation at the end. There was some unexpected conversations within the video of immigration about media and pragmatism and realism. And if you remember in the last video, Andy had attacked one of my sources, which and so and I think that some of you had seen the shade that he had thrown at me under jab. Anyhow, no, it was all, we disagree. We really have some disagreements on some things.
Yeah.
But I'm talking in general. We have disagreements in general. And that's why we have conversations, because we want to bring them to the table so that you all can sort of assess, have your own opinions, and formulate them out of our conversations. Hopefully that is the intention, right? That's why we do these videos. All right. Well,
Don't pause. No fucking thing.
Okay.
That's hilarious.
We're we're trying to make sure we don't look very plain with our background. So, in our conversation last week, we were discussing, and we had a very good discussion on immigration, by the way. But in that conversation, somehow there was this, even before we had started filming or recording, there was already a sort of a side comment that you and I had made. I don't know how it began, but it was about democracy now. And I didn't think much of it at that moment, and then we had recorded, and then you had brought up John Kelly, and I had said something about, we were discussing it, and you were attacking the liberals, which you should, by the way.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, we're in agreement on that. What I felt I had, what was unexpected for me, and this is what I'm trying to formulate, hopefully you formulate and articulate the thought really, so the topic, what we're going to have. But I thought what I was trying to understand was, even in that conversation, if you look at the last couple of, 6 minutes, at the end of our immigration video, we included this bonus. I was a little bit caught off guard by Andy's ideas of what media is supposed to sort of perform like and its role in society. And I hadn't actually discussed this with you in the past. So we had a discussion about it even after the video, but some of it was recorded. And then even during the week, you and I had a conversation about what we were going to discuss. And I remember that I said, you know what, we need to discuss, we need to put off North Korea, and we need to discuss media. And we even started delving into it even over the conversation on Thursday, I remember. And I was like, save this. I don't want to get into it. We'll just discuss it in front of the recording here. So maybe you can articulate, because I think I'm a little bit sometimes, the way that I think is just that, I sometimes have it in my head, and I think you understand me, what I'm trying to say, but I want to make sure it's clear for audiences, because we have a relationship, and within our relationship, you kind of already know what I'm trying to communicate, but for you to communicate and articulate clearly what we're going to be discussing.
My first question is, to talk about media is a little different than talking about, say, independent media or independent left media. I think most people would make a distinction between something like Democracy Now!, which is supposed to be independent media, and media.
All right.
I think we're talking about independent media.
All right.
Do you agree?
I think so.
Okay.
I think we are, yeah.
So I think the question came up So in a sense, are we talking about outlets like Nation, Huffington
Yeah.
Post, Democracy Now?
Huffington Post is liberal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Then we're saying a different distinction between. So I think we're talking about what is ostensibly left independent media.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. So
You have criticisms around it.
I think the thing I was saying was that outlets like Democracy Now, ostensibly independent, but around this issue, around this specific issue, I would say they're tailing the Democratic Party, or their actions and the articles they're putting out are largely in the service of the Democratic Party, and not exposing the fact that this immigration issue, as it's being raised from the top of society, is really about two capitalist parties positioning themselves for the November 2018 elections. Democracy Now isn't talking about that. They're actually taking sides on that stuff, and they're largely taking the sides of the Democratic Party in that. And in that regard, it's not that they're not doing good reporting and haven't in the past done good reporting, but around this issue and many others, they are do this in service largely of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to say there, but that was my opening. I think that's what I was saying, and maybe you agree or don't agree with that.
I had understood you said that you had said something around how Democracy Now needs to outright say Amy Goodman right now. Right, let's discuss Amy Goodman as a host. She needs to outright say she is for open borders. You said that.
Yeah.
And you also said that she should call things out. I argue that she is a reporter that is on the left politically, but really they are a platform for to bring together different perspectives to debate, discuss, expose, and to create dialogue for the masses. That is their intention as an alternative media that criticizes both Democrats and Republicans and bring even controversial voices to their program, like Rousseff, the Brazilian president, or decide to interview Bill Clinton and attack him harshly on all his policies that Amy Goodman did, and to make people aware of something that is not covered much in mainstream media, which is Syria and what's happening in the Middle East, to discuss issues that aren't just trending, because they discuss issues that are not just trending because it's clickbait, to discuss issues that they're not just pinning onto one administration but to several administrations and the root and source of those problematic parts of our society. So I think we need to have platforms like that. If you look at the video that we had done together, you had, and even our conversation on Thursday, you had said something around how they need to be opinionated and say outrightly open borders. And for me, that is one voice. But if what was that? What they are? Shouldn't we? I agreed, and that could be something like what you could do for yourself to make a blog, and write something like that, Andy, and share that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I am quite content as someone who needs to keep up with the world, and they're not the most perfect media. I agree, and that's not the only. The Intercept and Democracy Now aren't my only sources.
I understand.
So, but they are one of many of my sources to understand what is happening in the world, and that coming a platform for them to have to bring together different colorful voices to discuss the issues, even things I do not agree on, gives me a chance to listen to other people's stands and positions that I wouldn't normally listen to on my own. Like, religious people right now doing the poor people's campaign. As an agnostic, more atheist than anything, slightly atheist, but on the fence of it. I don't really listen to religious political activists, and they invite different activists from different backgrounds that I normally wouldn't even search for. And those discussions have been really good for me to sort of get a wide range of understanding of people's perspectives. When you say you want them to say an opinion, I don't think it's their position if you're going to create a platform and a sort of left-leaning, neutral platform to be able to say what they agree on to influence the public. I think that the people they bring on to their program can influence us. And I have been influenced by many.
I know that.
Yeah.
And I think that, well, first off, let's be clear what I am saying and what I'm not saying.
Okay, well, why don't you make yourself clear?
I mean, I'm not saying don't listen to Democracy Now! Or don't read Democracy Now!
I don't think that you're saying, yeah.
I think they're a good resource. I use them as a resource. Mm-hmm. What I am criticizing them for is for not exposing their bias, not talking about their political perspective that is their bias. If they're reformists, basically, right? They're reformists. Mm-hmm. And they're not revolutionaries. And for those of us who are revolutionaries, we have to figure out where do we have our platforms. The reason I like starting this with you is I really, unfortunately, don't think there is a platform by which a revolutionary perspective is put out from the left.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And Democracy Now!, which I would say sells itself as independent of the two parties, it does, I believe, is not. That it is actually operating as the left wing of the Democratic Party, attempting to influence the Democratic Party to take better positions in power. And you can see that in all the stuff where all the people they talk to around this issue and around immigration and around the issue of Syria as well are Democratic Party officials. They even take the position that the Democratic Party took around Syria, not really talking about the fact that there are questions about whether or not the gas even came from Syria, whether it came from the rebels. Democracy Now! Didn't take that up as much because that doesn't fit within their narrative, and it doesn't fit within the left wing of the Democratic Party, which largely took the position that the rebels are connected to the Arab Spring, connected to the initial Syrian the Syrian uprising. Okay, so I don't have a problem with that. I just think you should say what your perspective is, so people aren't fooled. And in this case, I think the Democracy Now!'s coverage of this is not really in service of immigrants. It's unfortunate, although I think they have good coverage. It's in service of getting the Democratic Party elected 2018. Because they're not exposing the fact that that's largely why this issue has been come up. It's not coming up from either political party to defend immigrants. And secondarily, they're putting on mostly Democrats, exclusively Democrats.
Not exclusively.
Well, mostly, and with that aim of saying these are people on our side. They had this one congressperson from Seattle, who actually is like a whole Russia conspiracy person about Russiagate, and they put her on very uncritically to speak as if she could go on about the immigration stuff. She had criticism of it, but she's in the Democratic Party, which is responsible for those policies. They're not. That to me doesn't expose that. It puts the Democrats off the hook, and then leads to people thinking that this is the party we need to follow into November to have a chance of, say, getting rid of ICE, which is a complete myth. Okay. Let me put it this way.
Can I just touch on this one point you said? She has brought on people that don't buy into the Russiagate conspiracy.
Yeah, okay.
So she has had invited
Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah,
right.
So just to be fair, it's not that she just invites people who are into this Russiagate thing.
Right.
She just criticized the whole Russian... she has people, and she invites people to
But
to that
take up the major
Okay.
point that I make, which is that predominantly she's talking to Democratic Party officials, politicians, with the understanding not to go up there and grill them, with the understanding of thinking that they're going to influence them and use them as a way of amplifying their message.
I certainly think that there are lots of criticisms I have on them, but I wouldn't say things that, like misrepresent them as well. And I think that when you say that they're buying into that Russian gate by inviting Congress people or Democrats, I understand where
I
you're
was
coming
I was using that as a criticism of the one of the
But I'm just going to say,
congressperson.
but because if we're going to discuss and nitpick something, we're going to make sure that we have to not misrepresent something as well.
Then just say, what are you going to say about what I'm saying about with regards to the?
Okay, go ahead.
It's almost exclusively Keith Ellison, this Seattle congressperson. It's almost exclusively Democratic Party people they've been interviewing and talking about them going to the border. That's what they're doing, and looking at this stuff and trying to help people there. That does not expose the fact that not only are Democrats responsible for this policy, they are in my mind, they're responsible for this policy, but they are cynically using this particular issue right now to win election in November with the aim of fooling workers into thinking they're going to do something good for immigrants around after they get elected, which is a lie. They're not.
So ideally, what would democracy now look like if it was not part of that democratic left? According to you.
I mean, it would actually basically predominantly probably put its fire against the Democratic Party, because at that point, once you're outside the Democratic Party, I think you are going to be like, what are we fighting for? We're not fighting for the Democratic Party's vision of how to attack immigrants. We're not fighting for the Republican Party of how to attack immigrants. We're fighting for something independent. The only independent position you could have is open borders. Any other position drives you into the Democratic Party. Any other position. That's why it's connected to that. And open borders are connected to this notion of revolution. Mm-hmm. They are. Mm-hmm. And if you accept the framework of we have to have borders, then you are accepting the framework of capitalism. You're accepting the framework of how do we modify capitalism to make it work. I'm fine with that. Of course, that's not what I want. But again, I'm not asking them to be revolutionaries. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that I do not think I think what they think they're doing is they think that they're straddling outside of the Democratic Party and inside the Democratic Party and influencing the Democratic Party to move left. And that's not at all what they're doing. They're driving the left into the Democratic Party because this was the description I gave to my partner. The Democratic Party is like a black hole. And there's an event horizon on the black hole. You go any part inside that event horizon, you get sucked in. If you put even your pinky toe, into that event horizon of the Democratic Party, you get sucked in. That has been the history of the left. And they've put way more than their pinky toe into the Democratic Party. They put a big arm, leg, and everything else. So I would say we have to understand that the democracy now is a great resource, but understand that it's largely a vehicle for trying to shift to the impossible idea of we're going to get capitalism to work by shifting the Democrats to the left, mm-hmm. Right? We talked about, and this is where it gets to pragmatism.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There is more a possibility. I don't think there's a great possibility of revolution, of working class revolution. I think it's very small. I think the globe is moving so quickly towards breaking up of nationalism or World War III, and the working class is so disorganized internationally. I think it's a very small chance that we're going to get our act together and have an international working class revolution in time. Maybe I'd put it at 0.5%, 1% chance. That might be huge. That might be bigger. Whatever. There is a bigger chance of working class opposition and working class revolution than there is of turning the capitalist party into a vehicle for change. That's what I'm saying. Right. I'm saying I'm the realistic person, and you are the person who's pie in the sky. If you think you can use democracy, or democracy now can keep its foot into the Democratic Party and do that thing that it thinks it's doing, which is bring it over to the other side. It can't. It will always be in service of bringing the other side over into the Democratic Party, because it's reformist, because it's always, and that's so.
I certainly think that there can be created alliances between progressives, and I think there can be alliances
between progressives and who?
And revolutionaries, or socialists, and people who are not stepping into the mainstream left. I think that there is.
But do you mean progressives like the Democratic Party politicians, or the people who vote Democrat? That's a difference. Because I think you're talking about Dennis Kucinich, or the woman from Seattle, I can't get her name from, who was on there. I think you're talking about Keith Ellison. I think you're thinking that they should be trying to influence those people, and maybe they can get them to take down ICE. Because that's what they said. Are you going to take down ICE? No, they're not.
Wait, hold on. There are some Congress folks.
There
that
are,
do
of
want
course there.
to-
Yes, of course there are.
I'm not saying that there
Yes,
are.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We completely agree. There are plenty of people, Democrats, who talk about changing things in a big way, and they are trying to fool you into staying in the Democratic Party. That's their role. That is their role within the capitalist class, as a capitalist party, which is to take the working class and to convince it that there is no alternative to reform, and the only alternative that is practical and pragmatic is this left wing is not a slide towards change; it's a slide towards capitalism and continuing of this problem we've had. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying. Of course they exist, but they exist there to make sure that revolutionary alternative never goes the way that I think it needs to go. And I think that some of those people on Democracy Now! May think it needs to go. They think they're in service of building that revolutionary alternative. Unfortunately, they are not. They are in service of continuing, at best, some surface reforms of capitalism. But it's not going to work. Capitalism is going to destroy this planet.
Go ahead. You were going to say something as it formulates my thoughts.
There was something I was thinking about because there's a book I've read. It's a book by Rosa Luxemburg, who was a German revolutionary who wrote a book called Reform or Revolution. And she poses it this way, and I agree with what she said, which is the fight for reforms is not a halfway measure between reform and revolution. She says, and I agree with her, that if your aim is to fight for reform, as opposed to your aim is to fight for that revolutionary change of society, then you are not actually just going halfway in the direction towards revolution. You are actually going in the opposite direction. Those people who fight for just the surface reforms of the existing system, capitalism, are actually not fighting in the same direction as revolutionaries. Revolutionaries are trying to get rid of it, and it means that we actually go in different directions most of the time. Mm-hmm. If you think it's good enough, if one thinks it's good enough just to reform capitalism, then it makes sense that you're trying to work towards getting the Democratic Party to be your ally and help you make that change. All right? But if you are revolutionary, and if you think we need to take down the entire system, then you don't want to get anywhere near the Democratic Party. They're your biggest enemy. Biggest enemy largely because they're speaking to the very same class of people that we're trying to speak to about how revolutionary change is possible, and they're telling that same class, it's not necessary, sit back, I'll do it for you. And in doing so, they literally disarm your side and put all those workers underneath them to make sure that capitalism never is never fundamentally changed. And for me, there is a sense of urgency around this question because we don't have forever. Like, we actually have to get something going. And it's the absence of the independence of that working class. It's the absence of the independence of the left that has made the left so bad today. And independence means you don't look to, certainly not Republicans, but equally not Democrats, as your way of making change in society. And every time we get caught up in that, every time we move into the Democratic Party, it turns out they change us, we don't change them. And Democracy Now! Is another part of the left that's without trying to do so, but I don't think it's trying to do so. I don't think trying to keep people confused, or it has the effect of confusing people into thinking that they are independent and they're not. That they're actually largely trying to be that left wing of the Democratic Party, moving the Democratic Party to the left.
Ideally, what would they look like if they weren't what you described to be a vehicle for the Democrats?
In this case, they would have really highlighted what was wrong with the issue of immigration, just as they have done. But they wouldn't have given a forum for any Democrats. They would have put both barrels, both on the Republicans and the Democrats, and exposed that equally both those parties are cynically using immigrants to attack the working class, to attack immigrants coming in, and also it turns out to attack workers who are living here. So that's what they would have done, but that's not what they're doing because that's not their outlook.
Mm-hmm. Can you name a source that you think that is ideally what you are describing?
Well, I joined, and this gets to funding a little. I told you that partly I was looking into the funding of this. I joined a revolutionary organization that ostensibly should have been independent because We were a membership organization. There was no connections, not just to corporations, but there's no connections to money anywhere. But I believe our organization, the revolutionary organization I was in, the reason it became more and more, in my mind, very reformist in action, but revolutionary in name and in words, was in part because increasingly when we didn't see our membership grow, and our organization needed money to project itself, project its literature, project its books, it got 401, it got, what is it called, those 401b status, or is that what 501b, nonprofit status for certain organizations they were forming to basically draw in money from the outside, and that increasingly made them susceptible to influence by forces that have a lot of money and have a lot of access to money. And I think our organization shifted its message to be left-wing still, but not ruffle the feathers of people who the liberal apparatus, which was largely funding it. So even though revolutionaries don't favor gun control, we don't say that. Even though revolutionaries are for the U.S. losing the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, we want our empire to lose because we think we want to turn the loss of our imperial wars into civil war at home. That's our position. We don't say that because it's going to make liberals upset and nervous. So we don't say these basic revolutionary positions because we think it's going to scare off our moneyed allies. So if we weren't connected to them, we could say these things. It's not illegal to say these things in this country. Under some conditions in some countries it was illegal. It's legal to actually say it here. So why don't we say it? We don't say it because we think we're afraid of it scaring away those resources, those liberal resources who believe we might be too radical if we said such a thing, right? Because then you'd literally be supporting Taliban when the U.S. is invading Afghanistan. You'd be like, no, I want the U.S. to lose. It has to, because it shouldn't be there.
Many of the social movements that you see historical social movements have been pushed mostly by the left, mainstream. Not mainstream, but I would say people who challenged the mainstream within the same party, the left. You understand? That, like, Elizabeth Warren, she is, I would say, liberal.
Yeah, of course.
And she has challenged her own party.
No.
And
the primary vehicles for change have actually been independent of both the Republican and Democratic Party. You're talking about the Communist Party and the Socialist parties in the 30s, okay, that ultimately gave up that independence later on. You're talking about the Black Panther Party in the 60s. You're talking about the Brown Beret movements in the 60s. Those movements initially, and as they got co-opted, then they became less effective. But the reason they were effective is the degree to which they were independent and not in any way looking to either party to make change. They essentially frightened both parties into making change. That's why Richard Nixon had far more liberal, like we had OSHA and we got out of the war and other things under Nixon that didn't occur under LBJ. Because it was their fear of those radical movements. So it's not the left wing of the Democratic Party. It's not the liberal wing that makes change happen. They're full-on capitalists. The only thing they generally make is war. That's the biggest record of the Democratic Party is one of warfare and of supporting slavery prior to the Civil War. I mean, you can take an example like FDR's New Deal, but he did that explicitly in the context of the independent movements of general strikes that were happening in the 30s, and the reason for his New Deal was to preserve capitalism. He was like, I'm the best friend business ever had, because I need to make these changes or we're going to have a revolution in this country.
So we discussed in the last video about pragmatism.
Yeah.
Or, because I said I was a pragmatist
right.
in the video. And I said that I was a realist.
Right.
And so I'm going to say some things that I want to be able to have, because I'm sure I'm not the only one, and there are people who are watching this who feel as if the implementation, we've discussed this before, and whether people are feeling disillusioned. I feel as if a lot of what you are saying comes off far-fetching to achieve. And I have positions. I'm fine being labeled within. I'm fine. I'm fine being labeled a mainstream progressive liberal. Possibly, I'm all right with that. I'm personally, I'm not, like, I have said this as well. I have leanings. I said in our very first video, and that would definitely make me. That would definitely is in disagreement with a lot of friends who vote on Democrats, or who vote progressive candidates for the elections. I think that for them I'm quite radical in those circles. Within other circles, I'm just considered another person that is just mainstream. That's fine. I'm all right with that. Here's what I will say for me. I think as many people who went to college, we study political science in form of theories. And I have certainly read lots of great, been exposed to lots of great political theories on how social movements occurred historically, on how philosophers have influenced the way that we think of political ideologies to be implemented for government and administration. But when we take on the position of from theory to practice, to embody, to be a stand for something outside of what we have here, at least, is a binary system. And I think with you, sometimes, and I cannot be the only one, really, when I listen to a lot of the things that you discuss, it's not in the form of criticism, it's more in the form of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, and I say this for anyone, it's not in the form of anything personal to you, but rather, I said in the last video that I have operated in a way that allows for people to have hope. That is my way that I formulate my way of thinking around, to get around certain positions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like to disillusion people, because I don't like to disillusion myself, that we can achieve that something, we can set a goal for ourselves to achieve if we have not seen it be achieved. When we see other forms of socialism, or even extreme dictatorship being manifested, and the closest people can think of as a democracy is this capitalist state.
Mm-hmm.
That is how we are conditioned to think. And if you are to, for me, if you are to organize, you want to make sure there is stamina for organization and activism to reform. I will just go back to what I have said about pragmatism. For me, it's important that people can strive towards something. And I understand, and when you speak about pushing something revolutionary, I don't see it. I don't see it. If we work on a small scale, we discuss the unit.
Right. I guess what I would say is,
I'm forming my thoughts.
You might not see it, but history is on my side, not on yours.
Mm-hmm.
You are telling people that and you're not the only person, that there's some way of reforming capitalism or getting the Democratic Party, the left wing, Dennis Kucinich, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, those people, we work with those people, we can get the Democratic Party to get people over to our side and change the system in a way with them that'll make it fair for everyone. You've never seen that. It's never happened because it won't ever happen. There's 0% chance of getting the Democratic Party to actually do something in the interest of workers. They'll make some changes in response to a struggle and things like that, but there is 0% chance of them. Zero. Not a little, zero. There have been revolutions. I already talked about a revolution, the Russian Revolution. They built up workers' councils. They ended a world war. The people who were most hated in society, essentially the blacks of Europe, Jews, became the leaders of that movement. Think about the black workers here becoming the leaders of our revolutionary movement, along with others. But that's what happened. A complete reversal, which is why when you were attacking Bolshevism, you were using anti-Semitism. All right. The role of women, gay rights were legalized in 1917. Homosexuality became legal. Women reached office when they were talking about suffrage movements here in the United States. Women were actually taking office and power in Russia. So that happened, but it was defeated. The movement happened, the revolution happened, and was defeated. So I have history on my side, but my revolution got defeated. And then it called itself socialism, and now we think of socialism not as this pluralistic uprising of the lower classes and a complete reversal of society. We think of it as one-party rule. But go ahead and read about the Russian Revolution in 1917, 1918, and you will say that does not describe what was going on. Okay? So my society has already existed. Your society, which is the Democratic Party leading us into the promised land, has never existed and never will. So that's why I'm saying I'm 10 times, 1,000 times more realistic than you are. Because you have 0% chance of seeing your society that you want. And I don't believe you want just like a little bit of immigrant rights or a little bit of that, because it ain't going to work. The Democrats are going to drive us into another war. That's where they're going to drive us. They already got us to go from 2 wars to 7 wars under Barack Obama. If they take the next election, I don't think they will because they're screwing up so bad. But even if they get it after 2020, 2024, they're going to be the ones beating the drums for World War III. Or Republicans, I don't know. But they're capitalists. Their job is to make sure that the U.S. is the #1 empire in the world. And their way of doing it is to lie to the working class and get the working class to help them in that project, which is what capitalists need. That's why they have this flag. The flag tells us that our capitalist class is our best ally in advancing our own cause. And that's what patriotism and nationalism is about. Okay? So I understand how. So the very thing that you would accuse me of, which is being impractical, I'm saying you have no historical example of the Democrats performing the role you think they're going to perform. And none of you do. And democracy now, I'm not hating on democracy now, I'm just saying that they unfortunately throw sand in the eyes of many people who I think would be moving in a revolutionary direction and continue to redirect them back to that reformist path. So if they do that, then we will continue to not see the kind of society we would need to see. I'm not a revolutionary because I think it's like, a nice society and let's all hold hands. I'm saying if we don't do it, human society will destroy itself under the profit system.
What would be some sources that you could outline for us?
Democracy Now! Is a source. All of them. There's socialist websites that find some stuff, but all those socialists, all they do is they read mainstream media and reproduce this. They don't have reporters, very few of them. Okay? All they have is analysis. What I would say is ask yourself, what sort of society do you think you want, and how are you going to achieve it? I have an idea about that. I think the working class is the agent of change. Many people believe that. Most of your professors are not going to tell you that. They are even Marxists, and they're not going to tell you that workers are the revolutionary agent of change, even though that many of them are Marxists. But people have given up on the working class, so we don't talk about it anymore. All right? But I'm in despair about the state of the working class, but I still believe that the working class is the agent of change, which is fundamental. That's a fundamental part of Marxism. Okay? And I believe that one of our biggest enemy and biggest opponent that keeps the working class from ever realizing its own independence, the Democratic Party, is probably our major opponent in that. In many ways, a bigger enemy than the Republican Party. They're both capitalists. They're both enemies of workers. But the Democratic Party in the United States is probably a bigger problem for revolutionaries than the Republican Party. And that's why, And that is probably what establishes my orientation to things like Democracy Now. They do great reporting, but at the same time, I'm very skeptical of their frame that I feel like they hide towards delivering good activists. I'm going to call out those independent voices that
Nation, Democracy Now,
right,
The Intercept.
right, that in the name of fighting for a left that I also am trying to build, divert it into a reformist track, divert it into the Democratic Party when it needs to be diverted onto a revolutionary track. And many of those people, I think, in Democracy Now, I think maybe like people who work underneath people like Amy Goodman would believe that, but I think they think it's not possible, and so they think this is the best they can do. And I disagree.
All right. So there was a lot that was said from your part. And in this conversation, I was listening to you, except I was trying to formulate my thoughts. I had mentioned that I was a little quiet because it wasn't I don't have something strong. I don't have a strong disagreement with you, actually. A lot of if people are noticing that I was listening, I was really trying to look for something I'm strongly in disagreement with you about. And I don't really have a strong disagreement with you. I think I do wear the disguise within the mainstream liberals. I think I like to partake within their circles because it gives me an opportunity to whisper in people's ears to think differently and to possibly even carry them on to other circles, such as many of my friends, including you, that have more an opposition towards the Democrats and Republicans. I'm okay with, and first off, I don't think I can not ever, but I don't think I can make myself, I don't consider myself to be a socialist. I think a lot of the things, I've said this in the very first video,
Yeah.
I do think I have leanings, libertarian, anarchist leanings, because if we were to discuss the issue of marriage, if we were to discuss issues of immigration, if we were to discuss issues on the economy, a lot of those aren't within the confines of the liberal left. So I
Are or are not?
They are not.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of my positions are not.
Right.
And so I want to make clear that I'm not a Democrat. I have voted Democrat. I have voted for a Green Party, and currently I'm a no preference party when I vote. What I think I do, which you criticize, is I would say that I am a reformist in the way, in my behavior, on the way that I am politically. I am also authentically stating that I am also developing a lot of the ways that I think about. We had a discussion on gun control, and for me to say something like that there shouldn't be any gun control is not a position that I can readily take. If you have seen the recent videos, there are some things that Andy and I can agree on, and there are certain things that I don't. I am under the guise of the liberal left, or the to rein in to more progressive positions, and that is where I am. I don't think that a lot of my friends would say that, because I certainly push for things that would seem to them very radical. But when we have these discussions, there is a clear, stark line between us, and I'm all right with that. It is simply this conversation, I am in hopes that this conversation is some place for discussion over there.
Yes.
To have this candid conversation around our political distinctions, and possibly even inspire others to be more clear about where their positions are. I think the majority of people have undeclared, hidden positions. But when you have a conversation like this, it gives people a chance to sort of mark where they stand.
Mm-hmm.
And it always so happens that when you have identity politics, people don't delve right into their positions. It is more that they side with one over the other.
Mm.
And because I am aware of my own background and where I stand, I'm okay with some things. It does not mean that I'm not willing to change, because I think that everyone, and I had this discussion with my friend from Florida, he lives in Florida, that we are all developing within our political stance. I certainly said that I don't agree, or I'm not sure if I can fully state that I completely agree with your position on gun, no gun control.
Mm-hmm.
But I left it open
Mm-hmm.
because it may be something that I might change in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, I have certain hesitations around no gun control. And that is how I feel around this as well. When we talk about our differences,
Yeah.
that it is a difference, but it is not, for me, it is not one that is a permanent difference.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it is one that is evolving within me. And in our conversation, you said a lot. There was a lot that you said that I was looking for a disagreement. And possibly if we do this again, a couple of months down, I can revisit this,
Right.
and we can have a reflectionary conversation. I think I want this to have is an effect on what you could potentially have other people, maybe that find themselves in the same shoes as I, that they could. It's provocative to think critically. Certainly, we have had these conversations. Not this specific one, but certainly we have had conversations where I have thought provocatively. I have thought critically on what current events we were living through. Right. In 2011, 2010, wherever we were around the hot debate around at that time. And I want to also state for other people that sometimes when you're on the fence, this is for my people, when you're on the fence on certain things, it's a good thing. I'm not sure how else to say it. It's a very good thing to be examining critically within yourself about where you stand, and it gives you a chance to sort of be. I have said from the very beginning when we said this, I'm okay not knowing everything, and it almost seems that when we live in this recording YouTube world, you have to know and be an expert on everything. And I want to be a representative for, like, sometimes you just have to figure it out as you go. And this is a process for everyone. For myself, I'm still going through what you've said currently, and I need time to reflectionate.
Yeah. Reflect.
Reflect. reflexionate. Oh my gosh, the Spanish English. Reflectionate. Reflect.
Well, you have 2 languages keeping your head. I only have 1. I can't learn another language apparently. Yeah.
Well, reflect.
Yeah.
To look over, so that I can see something as I look back on our video, because I even look back at our videos and then point something out that I can then come back to you and state, I have a disagreement on this, or or can we re-examine this, or can let's take a look back at this. So I will leave it at that. Now, as far as Democracy Now!, I want to state that I have lots of criticisms around them. They are, to me, a platform where diverse voices happen, and in this current state of affairs, they are informative, and they do bring out lot of numbers and figures that we can use as references.
Yes.
And so those are forms of sources.
Yeah.
Now, what they are, their agenda, and how they cater to the Democratic Party is something to be to look at, to see if how they are operating a circle within a circle.
Right.
So I'm all right with that criticism. What I'm trying to say is that I don't want people to think that you shut off all sources just because of your criticism. Like I said in the other video, I listen to the BBC and the Guardian, very strong liberal media, mainstream media. It is some like there. It's not like we shut off all these forums, but when you have something like, if I dare say, Breitbart, that truly does misrepresent figures, and maybe you can say something around that, but when you have misconstrued outright lies being presented as facts, because there are lots of things that are presented as facts. I'm not talking about opinions, Andy.
I understand.
He starts doing that face. So I'm not discussing opinions.
Yeah,
I'm discussing about misconstrued figures and misconstrued. You can have an opinion, but I'm discussing a misrepresentation of reality.
Have you finished, or?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I mean, I would say that
we were supposed to close.
I would say Breitbart, InfoWars, alt-right sources are good sources. Just like Democracy Now!, just like Time Magazine, just like New York Times. They're all good sources of information. Time Magazine just had a photograph of a little girl who was not, that with Trump over her, was entirely fake. That little girl was actually with her mom that was crying, and like they made her the poster child of somebody who had been abandoned or who had been separated from their kid. That's not what had happened. The mom had left. All right? That particular instance. There was another picture that was done of two young teenagers in a cage that was taken during Obama's presidency and used during that time. I'm not saying this. I'm just saying the fakeness, the lies are everywhere in the media. It is our job in all ends, on all ends.
Andy, when you say something like that, here is where I am in disagreement. You're saying that InfoWars, led by Alex Jones, who said that Sandy Hook was a conspiracy.
I don't agree with him on. I don't agree with on that, but I'm saying that they are a source of information. What he says about Sandy Hook, they also talk about like 9/11 as being an inside job. I think there's reason for it to believe that.
I certainly do think that the New York Times has BS'd as much.
But I'm saying that they're all the sources, all of them. You have to deal with them all, because you have to figure out how to put all this stuff together. That's how I feel about it, at least. As a revolutionary, I take sources from the right, from what is ostensibly called the left, from the center, and try to make the best you can of it. But I
do the same.
But I honestly don't think that there's I don't believe that there is a monopoly of lies on the right side that is not then followed by the left side. The left side also engages in its own fiction.
Yes.
And to penetrate that is hard. So that's what I'm saying.
I listen to Dave Shapiro to be able to listen to his criticisms on race and uh, and and his criticisms on politicians.
Yeah.
I'm not in. I don't actually most of the time I don't agree with him.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is Alex Jones, something like that, Infowars, where clearly is propaganda machine.
But so is Democracy Now! Democracy Now! Is a propaganda machine for the Democratic Party. Alex Jones is playing largely a propaganda role for Donald Trump and the far right, libertarians mostly. But every
I wouldn't
political
put them in the same boat.
um,
I would not put them in the same boat.
they have a different they are allied with different political forces, but I don't believe that Democracy Now! Has any more monopoly on truth than Alex Jones. I don't believe that. Because they have an angle. And the fact is none of them want revolution. And none of them are aimed towards that. And in the case, I probably utilized many of the figures that Democracy Now! Does. I'm just not going to call them one like a way bigger liar than the other. I'm not. I have to think it through. All I would say is that I've actually been able to find things on the far right that the left isn't talking about, as it relates to like
When you have a media source that goes back and retracts something and apologizes its viewers for, like Democracy Now!, to state that they misrepresented something.
yeah.
Whereas you have Alex Jones, who was invited by Megyn Kelly to discuss the Sandy Hook,
Yeah.
and he refuses to apologize and refuses to acknowledge that Sandy Hook ever happened. It just doesn't seem that you can compare them as forms of. They're not in the same boat.
They have a lens on information.
No, Democracy Now! Would not monopolize on lies like that. If you can mention, have they omitted and have not stated and reported on things? You can make a case for that.
Look,
but for them to have,
yeah. I mean, we'll have to get into a deeper thing around Infowars, because it's not even accurate. What he said was when Megyn Kelly basically called him out around the Sandy Hook thing, he said, no, I never said it, but he did have people on his show that did think Sandy Hook was an inside job. He said that, yes, all right, but I never called it that. But what he did then say, the reason he didn't want to discuss it is, he said, the reason people have doubts is because y'all made up numbers about the Iraq war. Y'all made up numbers around Kuwait. That's what he said. So do you expect us to believe that when this massacre goes down, we're going to believe these other ones? So he was actually calling out the media for its lies around other massacres. That's what he was doing. All right. Do I agree with him on that? But again, the reason that he was being called out was Trump. He's supporting Trump. So it's like you and I don't agree. I think I'm gonna look at the right and see what they have to say. Because I do think they have a perspective that allows me to know where they're coming from. But I don't agree that they're like any more dedicated. They're any less truthful than some of those mainstream media sources that I've seen.
I have a sense you want to wrap up.
Yes.
And I a lot of what you just said is going to be praised, or a lot it could be misconstrued.
Yeah.
Because we do live in a society where it's especially now, very divisive, and people are picking camps.
Yeah.
And these conversations are intended for us to have open dialogue about things that normally would not be discussed on the left or the right.
Right.
And I don't want to have people misrepresent something. So I think the way that we're going to do this is possibly if people have comments.
Yeah.
Or if people have questions on what you're saying. I certainly have a disagreement with you.
Yeah.
And I almost want to say something that is going to be asked out there. But I don't know if I should leave it up to people to ask you directly.
Go ahead.
You
I mean, we're going to see what's going to be on here anyway.
Yeah,
We're looking at an hour and 30 minutes potentially.
know.
Yes. So we'll have to see.
The only thing is, for me, is that those are sources that clearly spew hate. A lot of hate.
Yes.
And say divisive language that influences the public.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can justify those media outlets that have a clear, outright agenda that you can say and argue for, that Democracy Now! Has an agenda as well.
Right.
But I would say that Fox News, InfoWars, solely do not have as diverse voices on their platforms as Democracy Now!
Right.
And so I do not think they are equals. And you're leaving people, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, you're leaving some of us feeling as if you are putting them on the very same boat. And I would ask that you clarify what you're trying to communicate.
I am suspicious of all their frameworks. All of their frameworks are a framework of maintaining capitalism. Mm-hmm. All of them. And they all use information in the service of maintaining capitalism. So they all lie in different ways. The right-wing ones that I read, way more racist. You're right. But the only thing I would say, though, is the hate comes out of capitalism. It doesn't come from Breitbart. So any framework which is about maintaining capitalism is about maintaining that hate. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
say this again for.
Any framework which is about maintaining capitalism is about maintaining that hate, because capitalism lives on that hate to keep workers divided. Mm-hmm. So I understand how there is a far right, and I do think a revolutionary is going to want to know what those people on the far right are saying. And you're going to find that some of their facts they give you are going to be like, oh yeah, like, because they don't like the Democratic Party. So I've been able to find things on the Democratic Party from them that none of the liberals want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So you can get that, all right? Mm-hmm. But none of them are in the service of something I want. All of them are in the service of keeping society as it is, all right? And maybe making it more nationalistic, maybe reforming capitalism and making it so-called nicer, you know? But all of it is about keeping capitalism. And all of it is going to serve towards maintaining hate, maintaining war, maintaining national boundaries, maintaining racism, maintaining sexism, maintaining the attacks on gays and transgenders, right? Because that's what capitalism lives on, as well as maintaining the day-to-day, hour-to-hour exploitation of workers across the globe. Mm-hmm. All of those media outlets are in service to that. So if you're a revolutionary, you don't have anything to look for in terms of who's going to guide you towards the truth. You have to use their outlets. You have to use the information and figure out on your own what the truth is, because they're all trying to lie to you in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. They're all trying to tell you that this system can work. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean. Mm-hmm. And I understand, well, I'll say, yeah.
No, say something if you have to, because I think it's very important
that
you didn't end on that note earlier. Yeah. I think you need to expand.
Yeah. I understand why it's upsetting to hear that I might look at one like the same as the other, but I kind of do. They're all ones I have to be very guarded about how much I take in what they give me, because I know in one shape or form they're all trying to lead me back to the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Capitalism.
And one of the capitalist parties. Mm-hmm. You know, InfoWars tries to pretend that it's actually independent Republican Party and that kind of stuff, but it's not. You know, and in fact, some of the InfoWars supporters criticize Alex Jones for being a Trump shill. Interesting, but those are the same people who also want to keep our borders secure, and you know, we'll talk about Islamofascism. It's some crazy, nasty stuff. Mm-hmm. But Islamofascism is also in some ways accepted by the framework of the Democratic Party in their logic of the war on terror. Mm-hmm. So there's not much to choose from there. Not for revolutionary. For me. I look at the whole spectrum, and I see lies and truths in all the areas. all the way from the right and from the right of Infowars to the left of Democracy Now, I see truth and lies mixed together. And I do know that working people look at all these things, and they're going to look at them whether you say to do so or whether I say to do so. It is important for me to kind of like see what those other perspectives are. All right. And yeah, there's racism there, no question. Nationalism, sexism. It is more overt. When I've listened to, I can't remember the guy, some Irish accent dude who I heard. But I also hear things that are another way of looking at it, and it causes me to go back towards the left-wing media and look at it through another lens. Because at the end of the day, none of these outlets, like I said, are ones that are going to help. They're not directing me to where I want to go, but they're all sources of information. So I don't know. I'm repeating myself.
Well, on that note, I would push back that they are not on the same boat. So we are trying to conclude. We invite everyone to start looking into a podcast or audio form for people, because you simply cannot sit through these and watch us. We're not doing anything special on this couch, this lovely open couch. No, we're not doing anything special on this couch. So I invite everyone to listen to this conversation on audio. If you just leave your YouTube on, or you can go to the website which Andy just created, and please like and subscribe so that this could be accessible to other people as well, if you like what you hear. And let's try to wrap up. We might even have to make a part two, or a separate topic, however we decide that. Here we are again. Once again, we are touching on an unexpected, I think we just opened another can of worms. So we have to try to make something that is strictly weekly, strictly one topic. Yeah, and so am I think at this point.
Yeah.
So I think we can always come back to this conversation. We're ready for those trolls.
Yes. Let's see.
Why don't we conclude?
Yes.
Yes.
You already said subscribe and all that kind of stuff. We have to figure out what do we think.
Say it again.
Yes.
We are hoping that these conversations sort of give you access to, neurologically speaking, to sort of create pathways in your brain to be able to think outside of your realm, you know.
Yeah.
But if it is provocative enough, and you find that there is any value in what we are trying to discuss, even from the authentic conversations that we minimally edit, if there's anything in this that is valuable to you, please, like and subscribe. More so subscribe. Liking doesn't really do anything for us. It's more of like subscribe so that you can continuously be notified.
And then there's a notification bell that you can hit so that you can get notifications, supposedly.
Yeah. So.
And we're gonna also we're embedding in the thing about where we have a podcast that we're storing. So if, like you said, if you want to listen to it, you can get to that website through the bottom underneath in the little byline underneath the video.
Yeah.
What about our next video?
We have to discuss North Korea.
All right. North Korea is sitting there. Is there anything else? Man, I'm wiped out. So I think maybe it's going to be North Korea next week.
I actually thought we were going to discuss Mexico.
Oh, are you going to be gone?
Yeah, I will be. Well, I'll be there for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we can discuss
we're going to be trying to do this by Skype, actually. We're going to figure it out. So it might be Mexico or North Korea or something. Yeah. So we'll find out. Yeah. We'll find out next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.